Crash Bandicoot. This game was legendary. The series alone was enough of a reason to own a PS1 back in the late 90s, but now that the first 3 games have been remastered, put together, and is accessible on every platform, there's no better time to experience one of the greatest titles in the platforming genre. Right now you're probably thinking, this guy's high on nostalgia. Well, I have one thing to say to you. Let's go back in time to the 1990s. It was considered one of the most innovative decades in video gaming. During this time, a lot of games were moving from 2D sprites into full 3D graphics. It was also the time period which first-person shooters, real-time strategies, survival horrors, and massive multiplayer online games began to become popular. One of the greatest things about the generation of video games and the previous one is that developers mostly respected the intelligence of their audience. There was no obnoxious tutorial modes, no backstory shoved down your throat, just good gameplay. This is why Crash Bandicoot was such a good game back in the day. Not only did it have responsive controls, it was fun to play and just overall simple in design. It's a given that games nowadays have become more complex in terms of mechanics, but having the Crash series return feels fresh and it gives us a break from overused formulas. Hardly anything is explained in-game, you are just some orange animal dude with blue shorts. You can jump, you can spin, you can dance? I don't fucking know. What starts off as a walk in the park builds up to a full-fledged adventure, poking at your curiosity, making you want to know what's around the corner, or not, and creating your own experiences through gameplay instead of being told like in a book or in a movie. One of the best things about video games is the way it can teach a player as they play. Crash does this quite well. It generally introduces basic mechanics as foundations, then builds on top of it to add difficulty. In the first level of the first Crash game, you wash up on shore and Crash is just standing there, so naturally you hit a few buttons and bam, you're moving around. Running backwards just makes you run into an invisible wall, so you can just assume that there's generally one direction to advance in levels. Now in front of you there's a few crates in your way, and when Crash woke up on the beach you probably saw he did a little spin move. With experimenting, you eventually find out that one button jumps and the other one spins. You've probably noticed that the crates on the left have some colorful fruit in them. As a kid, I always thought they were mangoes, but my friends told me they were Wumper fruits. What the hell is a Wumper fruit? Anyway, you try to break them with your newfound spin ability, but what the hell, there's no fruits. But luckily, there's a second one, so you try your jump ability because that's the only option you have left, and you got yourself some fruits. See, by experiencing this ourselves, it feels more rewarding. It makes it easier to remember that those crates that look like that have to be jumped on. I always found the sound effects oddly satisfying, even though I never really ate fruits like that. It seems so basic right now, but there's a few difficulty spikes, mainly in the first game, so it's a way for it to teach you simple things in controlled environments. Now ahead of you, you run into a giant crab. You can see he moves side to side really slowly and consistently. Through trying things out, we learn there's multiple ways we can approach enemies. We can avoid them, we can attack them by jumping on them or spinning on them. Discovering more enemies, we realize that they all have some sort of pattern, a rhythm. The game doesn't tell you this, but you learn this by the way it's designed. This rule applies to every enemy and obstacle in the game. In Crash Bandicoot 2, the Eel Deal stage, the first thing you see when you enter is a body of water. And since there really isn't anything in your way, you just go right ahead. But then around the corner, there's another body of water, but this time there's an eel zapping it. But notice how they place enemies in front of you, so it's uncommon for you to be already in the water before the first zap. That's good level design. In the Snow Go stage, there's these frozen floors which make you slide across. It also increases depending on how much momentum you have, but it's not a big deal since there isn't really anything too dangerous, so you can kinda take your time with these crates and get a feel of the ice. Later you run into these wooden pillars that come down in a rhythmic fashion, and steel pillars which come down when you get really close to it or when you get under it. By themselves they're pretty easy to get around, especially if you are aware of them. After learning about these obstacles like the ice and the pillars and getting through to the later snow stages like Snowbiz and Cold Hard Crash, you get put into areas where you have to deal with multiple mechanics at the same time. Now the game's more challenging, but you don't feel like no one told you what to do, and overcoming the obstacles is the most satisfying feeling ever because you're learning and improving. Now it goes without saying that Crash Bandicoot can be a frustrating game to play. Nobody enjoys dying over and over again, but with gaming hitting the mainstream market, a lot of games have been aimed towards as much people as possible. As a result, most modern games lack the addictive, challenging nature that many games in the 90s had. Of course they still do exist, but are a lot less common. Crash is well designed, the fact that it has a mix of a cartoonish art style, difficult but rewarding gameplay, and at the time a new 3D platforming environment. These tools in the past helped attract people into gaming. The stages that involved running towards the camera and the use of vehicles really spiced it up. I always loved how it required you to have your reflexes on point, and you often find yourself staying up late saying to yourself, just one more try, I'm so close, time and time again. Speaking of time, they added time trials which were first introduced in the third game but are also now in the first two games, perfect for those completionists out there. It's good to see Activision and Vicarious Visions bring our Orange Bandicoot back, making the series accessible to a much larger audience while slightly making it a bit easier, but still stays true to its roots. The controls are almost the same and the remastered soundtrack is everything you'd hope for. The addition of autosaves, extra 2 levels, and the ability to play as Crash's sister, Coco, are also welcomed. I personally prefer the PC version because of the high frame rate and graphics, but you can get any version you want because I hear all versions are pretty solid. Get the Insane Trilogy if you want 3 fully remastered platformers done right, that don't hold your hand, and the only loot boxes in this game are the crates you'll be smashing. I can recommend the Insane Trilogy at full price, but if you're not too eager to play it right now, it's probably going to go on sale within the next 6 months. In the end, it's just the old Crash games with a graphical and sound update. The remaster brings an extra few levels, the ability to play as Coco, and the time trials for the first 2 games. But if you haven't experienced the series yet, or are looking to get back into it, this trilogy has a lot of content, accessibility, and replay value. This ain't no cash grab remaster and is a solid addition to any game collection. With Crash done so well, I can't wait for Spyro Remaster. This is Caboose Snort, and thanks for watching.